Leann Findley Maxwell here again with Panther City Partners podcast. I'm so excited to be talking today again with Anneliese Hill. We spoke last time about her life and transitioning as a single mom and as a parent and then just the career and the differences in your career. And so today I wanted to delve a little bit more, Anneliese, if that's okay, into your yoga practice and mindfulness and how you're using that, not just for yourself, but to teach other people, adults and kids. And so if you don't mind just chatting about that a little bit, first of all, just tell us where you're doing your yoga these days.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for having me again on your lovely podcast, Panther City Partners.
Thank you.
Yeah, very cool. So I started practicing at Elemental Yoga, and my teacher, Bryn, was and is an incredible yoga teacher. So big thanks to her. And she also taught with two other women, Carrie Rollins, who is a doctor in town, Dr. Carrie Rollins. She has the Wellness Center, and she's been practicing for a really long time.
Nice.
And another woman, Shanti Webb Nolan, who owns and runs Keller Yoga.
Oh, okay.
And the three of them had a partnership called Trinity Yoga, and I was one of the 2 or 3 cohorts that went through.
Right.
And I currently teach at Raja Yoga, which is the Wellness Center's yoga studio.
Oh, okay.
So the Wellness Center with Carrie Rollins, it used to be one building. She had her doctor's practice, and there was a acupuncture doctor there as well. And then she taught the yoga in the yoga studio with some other teachers as well. And she teaches Kundalini. And then she took her practice, her doctor's practice, I don't know, that's what you call it, her wellness center, to a different location. And they kept the yoga studio, and they opened it under a different name.
I see.
So Raja Yoga, mostly Kundalini. However, I teach Hatha, and there's another Hatha teacher, and then I also teach kids.
Yeah.
It's really lovely. It feels like home. I like everybody I'm there with.
That's awesome.
And I feel
not many people get to say that about the places they work.
Well, it's really low key, and it really is pretty small. And I know that from a business point of view, it's probably not ideal to have a small population, but it's stable. And Carrie Rollins is an amazing teacher, and she has been very kind to me. And it's a tight knit community, and it's mostly. I would say it's mostly like middle age and over are the people that come in. And my classes are typically pretty small, but I really I teach a Sunday class there. And it just feels like I can be myself. It feels like there's not a lot of pressure to be this thing that people think about whenever they think about yoga. It's like, when you say I'm a yoga teacher, and I don't do yoga, I can't do yoga.
Yeah.
Like lots of people tell me that.
Right.
And I have to kind of see where they're coming from because I think so differently.
Right.
Like, you could do yoga right now.
Right.
To sit a little taller and take a breath, let's do yoga right now.
I do think that people have this mindset of what yoga is and who does yoga. I mean, I've listened to some different people talk about yoga that, we have this in our mind that it's an exercise, that you have to be thin to do it, that most of the people that do it are white, that most of the people that do it have money because they have time to go and practice yoga. So it's nice to hear that you're talking about this different bodies and different types of people from different walks of life are able to practice yoga. And it really can be for everyone. But it's hard to get that around that mindset.
Well, it is, because most of the things you see from the media are those images. Right. I mean, and even as a person who has been practicing for a long time, I struggle with that sense of or feeling of inadequacy when I see and am around peers or people that are actually younger than I am who make up a lot of the teachers that I am around are in their early 20s. And that's what they chose instead of college, or maybe they went to college and chose yoga right out, and their bodies are able to do things that when you're 32 and like I was a soccer player for 13 years and my hips hurt and my shoulders hurt and I got issues, y'all. and
it's nice to hear that somebody can like that. I mean, that you don't have to have that certain body to do
and
yoga.
In fact, I think it's really important to remember that that's not something even to aspire to,
right?
For people, and that if you want to, of course, hell yeah, go for it. And I do. I want to do handstands, and I want to, do a standing split or whatever. But when my body's like, take your time. This transition is going to be a lifelong one. Just keep going, and you'll keep seeing the benefits slowly but surely.
I think that's one of the things I like about yoga. I've done it off and on over the last 15, 20 years. But there is you're not trying to get to a certain place. Like it's called the practice of yoga, because even the people who've been doing it for 50 years and who are these awesome teachers, they're still practicing it.
Right.
There's not a set, like once you get to this point, you will have mastered yoga, but you're always in that transition stage. And I think that's a really good metaphor for life, because we are just all practicing life.
We are practicing life.
We're not trying to get to one specific move or one specific position. Once we get to that position, we're gonna find the nuance in it, and we're gonna be able to do it a little differently each time. So that's a nice way for me to think about yoga, because sometimes I do feel like I can't do yoga.
Right.
I know that I can.
Well, and you can't do yoga the way that these people are showing themselves that they, can. And the practice is really important. That's something that you said something about that made me think about children, because I wish maybe it'll come back to me. But
I do think that's important to talk about with kids, because this is one of the things I'm trying to instill in my own children, is this growth mindset, and that it's the doing that is the reward, and not the finished product. It is not the grade that you make at the end of the class, or what you score on that test. It's what you learned and how you learned, and how that learning is going to help you learn more later. And I think that can be really good to teach in the yoga class, because that's what they're learning in the yoga class, right? That they're learning that, like, maybe you got to this point today, and next week when you get here, you're going to get a little bit further, but you can't get further until you first get to this point.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. Yeah, and the kids' classes are so different, because children have no idea what yoga is. Right. I mean, unless their parents practice, they might know warrior one, warrior two, tree pose. Like most kids know what a down dog is, right? But
Finley's favorite pose is happy baby.
Yeah, happy baby. That's Oliver's. He loves happy baby. This is a happy baby. He loves babies.
Yes, so does she.
So cute. Shout out to my new baby, Hayes, who's my little nephew.
Oh, yay.
I have another little one called Henry. So anyway, lots of H's in our family. But they don't know that what they're trying to get to.
That's
so
true.
They're just like, what are we doing? Okay. And I always start by trying to see, what do you think about yoga? What is yoga to you? What does that mean to you? And, most of them will say stretching, exercise, mindfulness, relaxation. And it is all of those things. Yeah. And then I really make it a point for them to look at their hands, to look at their feet, to watch themselves, because that's where the practice is. It isn't about reaching a certain pose or a certain thing in our life or on the mat. It's about, how are you moving your body? How in control of yourself are you? And I haven't always been in control of myself. Control is another elusive thing when you come from a background where the males are very strong. And as have been in my family, like, I didn't learn about self-control,
right?
Because it wasn't always taught to me.
Not you were not in a bad way, but you're controlled by other people. Their ideas are the ones that you're supposed to follow,
right? And that's the typical way of life, and that was probably what I had a hard time with when as a teacher, as an educator, because I didn't want to control you.
Right.
I want you to control you.
Right.
Which comes off as a parent, I was like really laissez-faire. I was really hands-off. He had a really long leash because I wanted him to learn.
Right.
But unfortunately, you don't learn that way either. You do have to have guidance, and it needs to be pretty specific.
Right.
So I have them look at their hands, have them look at their feet, and I have them watch themselves. So how on your mat can you be today? Can you be totally on your mat? Like, your mind's on your mat, your breath is on your mat. You're not looking at other people. You're not trying to, that person's following instructions and that person's not, because kids love to do that kind of thing.
Yes.
And the practice starts there for me. They say in the dream world that lucid dreaming, you can be in control of your dreams if you can learn how to see your hands in your dreams.
Oh, interesting.
So, and a lot of, when you're meditating or whatever, if you can visualize your dreams, then, or even ask to see them or if you can visualize your hands and ask to see them in your dreams, then you have some amount of control over your subconscious mind. So, that's a good place to start for kids. And then everything else is really fun. Like we pretend to be animals all the time. That's a really big part of because it's another way to teach kindness and awareness of the earth is to think about animals and to embody them and to embody their noises and to let loose in that way when you're a kid you have to be able to do that. And we're not giving kids those spaces very much.
Right. That's just what I was thinking about. My kids are huge into pretend play, and that's always been something, imaginative play, that they are really good at. But I can see as they get older, they're losing some of that. And to have a space where that's the point, is to have that imaginative play and to not let go of that. And then if you can keep it as you grow up as a kid, then you're going to have it as an adult.
It's true.
And how different is your life if you can do this play, And
imagination is a really beautiful thing because it's the root of intention setting. So a kid told me this morning, she said we had done it during the Shavasana practice where they practice being dead, right?
Yes,
okay,
right.
So bringing in the death element, which is pretty funny. And I mean, to teach children because they're so pretty much unaware and they always giggle a little bit like, what are we going to do that pose for, know? But so it's the circle of life and honoring stillness and honoring the process of the fullness of what it means and to conceptualize maybe that we don't know where we go when we die and everybody does. So we need to get comfortable with this idea of passing because people try to avoid it and are very scared of it. And so she had done Shavasana, and during the Shavasana, I do a little bit of a guided thing sometimes. And I said,
a guided meditation.
Right. I just told them because they were going into camp. So it was their first day of camp. And this was at Arts Fifth Avenue. Super cute. Yeah. And they were going to go do their day of creativity, right? They do drums, they do theater, they do music, they do
cook,
they do all sorts of things at that amazing place. And they start with yoga. So she said afterwards, I was imagining this artist and she wrote the word creative or she painted the word creative. And I said, that's awesome. I was like, I wonder if you can actually do that today. Because then how cool would it be to do the thing that you imagined?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So, and that's where it all comes down. It's like if we can get still enough in our mind, and that's the practice of yoga. It's like, yes, we're in control of our bodies so that we can really let them go and then notice the mind. Because we aren't our thoughts. We aren't our feelings. We aren't all of these different things that come from the external world. We are the watcher. We are the seer. And that's the essence that is in everything in the universe, right? It's that intelligence through the flowers, the bees, through everything. Right. And if you can tap into what's going to guide you through the day, if it's creativity, and that's going to be your intention for the day,
right? Then
how cool is it to go and do something creative and be like, heck yeah. Like I gained self-trust and I gained empowerment and I gained experience and insight. And so that was a beautiful moment in those little kids' lives.
What do you see as the way that, because I mean, hearing you talk about getting in tune with your body and being in control of it so that then you can be more present in your mind. How do you see that as beneficial to kids? Like what are the things that you're seeing that those kids are be able to express? Your story about the intention of being creative, but like in the ways that they interact with each other or the ways that they interact with their parents, because I'm sure you see snippets of those kinds of interactions.
Well, it reminds me of the practice. So everything is a practice. And for the most part, when you're on the mat, you have that intention. Right. So kids will naturally get more quiet. They will get more comfortable. They will stop seeking attention from their neighbors or from, and that's hard for a lot of kids. They will tune into balance. Watching them try to balance is hard, for kids to balance on one leg or whatever it is. I don't know how it always affects their life off the mat because I don't always see it.
Right.
So I think that the more they practice, the more exposure they have to themselves, without needing to be in competition, or answering questions or giving feedback, because everything is driven by feedback in education.
But listening to their own feedback, because that's what you're doing in yoga is you're listening to yourself.
Right. It's immediate. So I think my hope is that the more you're in tune with your body, the less likely you are to let somebody violate you, to let somebody cross your boundary, or the more aware you are when that is happening.
Right.
So you can feel it. If you're always told those feelings don't matter, or somebody's pushing you all the time at school and nobody's really taking care of that, then you just grow up, not really aware. You just associate from so much. And I've walked that path myself. So it's like, okay, if I can really be these sensual bodies are really cool. Like, they hurt sometimes.
Sure.
But they're amazing, and our imagination is amazing. And what a rich thing to be in love with ourselves, so that we can really be protective of our earth and protective of where we come from.
When I talk to people about transitions in my coaching practice, I talk to them about, there's several tenets that I like to remind people of, make a plan, but also be flexible and listen and trust yourself, because you really are the expert in you. But I feel like, and we talked about this before, when you have so many voices coming from all these different directions and well-intentioned, loving people giving you, ideas about what they think is best for you, it can be really hard to tap in and listen to your own voice. And so it seems like the practice of yoga as an adult or as a child really is about getting you to the point where you do listen to yourself and you can trust yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important for our kids because, as we've said, my kids go to public school, and I think for the most part, it is a great place for them. But I can also see that there's things that can be stifling in any kind of educational setting, but especially one that's such a large system, and that they don't, they're well-intentioned, loving people are telling them what to do and what to think and what to say all day, and then they start to not trust themselves. And even as a parent, I'm one of those people, well-intentioned, loving people who's telling my kids what to think and say and do. But giving them the space in a safe environment to practice listening to themselves and to practice trusting themselves seems like such a great, that's something I want my kids to have, but I don't always know how to create that. So what do you think as a parent are some ways that maybe I can create that at home if I'm not necessarily practicing yoga? Like what are some little things that I could do that take from a practice?
Yeah. Great question.
It was a long question.
It was, but what you started talking earlier about listening to yourselves and the voices coming from all these well-intentioned places. So I guide children at a church, and I hardly ever really talk about Christianity. I tell stories.
Yeah.
So I tell stories from all over the world and different religions as well. And in a story, you create wonder. So when there's wonder, there's an invitation for a kid to explore their own answers.
Yeah.
And I know y'all are big readers.
Yes.
So any kind of storytelling is excellent for building their own inner dialogue.
Right.
Anything sensory. Anything sensory from the animal noises to what you're eating and cooking, to the colors to color. So one of the Buddhist texts that I read from is called the Shambhala. Trungpa was the person who brought that to the West. And they talk about your basic goodness. So anything to get people in touch with their basic goodness, which means our ability to see red our ability to see teal, our ability to hear each other or a noise, to taste.
Right.
So anything sensory brings us immediately to the present moment.
Yeah. And not just like eating food to eat food, but just like thinking about what are you eating and how does it feel once it's in your mouth and what does it feel like, as you swallow? Like
what happens before it gets to your mouth?
Right. Right.
Gosh, what happens? There's a whole journey. There's a whole life that happened to that berry that, took months to grow and it popped in your mouth and it took 10 seconds to eat. Okay, so what happens? So a really nice there's a exercise called the raisin exercise. You can do this at home. It's easy. So you get a raisin. Anything will do. It doesn't have to be a raisin.
Right.
I didn't love raisins as a kid, so maybe
like a dried fruit or
anything.
Okay.
Anything to eat. Preferably natural, not from not something that's going to have a piece of trash, whatever. Right. So you hold it in your hand and you look at it like you've never seen it before. Like you are exploring this planet on, this is a planet or this is something you've never seen. Like, whoa, this exotic fruit. I've never seen this before. So I look at it and I explore it with all my senses before I taste it. So I explore it with my fingers, my eyes. I smell it. What do I hear? What's its story? And then I get it close to my mouth and I maybe I touch it with my lip or my tongue and my mouth, what happens in my mouth, right?
Right.
Like, what happens in my mouth? What happens in anybody's mouth? What happens in your mouth right before you kiss somebody? Right. I mean, wow, that's an amazing experience, right? So then you start to be in touch with what's happening in my mouth. Okay, so then I put it in my mouth. Oh, what do my teeth immediately want to do? What is my tongue doing? And just being aware of the processes that
and slowing down.
Right.
I feel like whenever we eat, it's just like throw it in your mouth and get it down there as quickly as possible.
Chomp.
Yeah.
Done. Give me the next one.
Yeah. Thinking and just slowing down in that moment can then help. You're going to practice there, and then you can transfer that skill to other areas.
Right. And slowing down is that you eat less and when you're more aware of what you're eating, you're consuming less. And that's a really important thing for our life as Westerners. We have to consume less. Everything comes with a piece of trash.
Right.
Every bag of
grapes. How am I going to get a grape without having trash?
Where are the farm? You can go to California and handpick your strawberries and take them home, whatever. But that's not a big thing here. So the less we consume and need, right, the more rich you can get in those moments that are like, oh, okay, I'm going to eat this grape. But I mean, gosh, I do it with my son. He scarfs his food. His whole mouth will be full of food, I know. But he's getting something. He's getting a little bit, and he'll think about it as he grows up, Well,
and I think that does bring a really good point. So these mindfulness practices that you're talking about, with whether it's yoga in a studio, whether it's telling stories at your home, whether it's really being intentional about eating and thinking and being very sensory about those things, is there's so much that I want immediate gratification. Like I want my child to have learned something in every moment and every time I do something with them. But knowing that they're getting little pieces, just like me as an adult. I'm getting little pieces each time. And it may be, years down the road before I realize, the cumulative effect of doing that over and over again now I understand why I was doing that. But it's not happening immediate. And that can be hard.
It is
in
hard.
Any practice, but yoga, especially when thinking about I want to do this now, but it's that cumulative. And that can help you in transitions too.
Exactly.
To know that it's not going to, you're going to have to do it over and over again. And you've got to practice. What does it look like when I transition from the school year to the summer and then back to the school year? And if I can practice these mindfulness techniques, this awareness in those easy, quote unquote, easy transitions, easier, then when I do come up to a really difficult transition, a big life change transition that affects more than just me, maybe, since I've practiced transitioning, it'll be easier to do it in those big
and those big life moments.
Right.
So that, and I don't know how much time we have, but a few more minutes.
Yeah, we have a few more minutes.
Can I share one thing?
I would love for you to.
Thank you. So we met through my cousin, Mary Beth, and we're friends in college.
We were friends in college. So, still friends.
Yeah. I know. I saw y'all's post recently. I'd love to hear about that later. Our grandfather passed a year ago, and he was a Renaissance man for sure. He was a farmer and lived in South Texas his whole life, but he knew how to do everything. He was a teacher, and he was a coach, and he knew every tool and every animal. He knew all the birds. He knew all the flowers. He knew everything, from from his era,
Right.
And he passed very quickly. He fell, and then a couple weeks later, he had gone. And when somebody like that, when you lose somebody like that, there's no process that we go through. There's all the legalities. There's all the things that you have to do to for the funeral and he donated his body to science. So I'm sure there was things there. I wasn't a part of any of that, but I know that it exists, and it kind of rushes the process of what would otherwise be a natural thing, and what do our ancestors do to honor, and what do people around the world do. So we interred his body last few weeks ago, his remains, his ashes, and everybody's all there, and we're at the.
You have a big family.
We have a big family, and there's lots of kids. Yeah. And so it's hard to have these, even as funerals, there was children everywhere, and it was loud, and it was kind of comical in a way, and as it should be.
Sure.
Okay, that's life. And then there was a man there at the graveyard cemetery who was in charge of digging the hole or placing the remains, which I found a little odd. And he was kind of watching and finding his moment. And we sang a few songs and did a few things, our family did. And then everybody's kind of okay, we're done. We're done. And he's like, is it time? And I don't even know if he spoke much English. And we're like, okay. And we kind of signaled for him to place this white box, nothing's on it, in the ground. And I'm like, gosh, this is so sterile. And so I just went over, I was like, this is what I do. This is me giving a blessing. And it happened. It wasn't like I had planned it, but thinking about it, I think I would put a little dirt of my hand. Oh, and I had a pencil and pen, and I was like, let's write a little note, And then all of a sudden everybody's like, oh yeah. And they got an acorn, and the kids are getting little things and leaves and little pieces. Oliver had a little picture of himself. We put it in there. And, it was a transition that so easily could have been we're done. We're going to wrap up. We're going to the pool. Let's go have lunch.
Right.
But instead, we all took a moment, and everybody, where that man was holding his shovel and was just going to otherwise shovel the dirt on top, everybody that wanted to could get a handful and do it the way that you would want.
Right. And participate in and give your final send off and your feelings in that moment.
And even if you don't have a lot to feel there, because it's hard to, because there's so many people, and it is a transition, so there's not a lot of space for feelings. You can at least look back on it and think, hey, I did that. We all took a moment to really honor him in his final thing. It was his final moment, and he rested and next to his wife and other family members. So,
and you got to bring some awareness to that situation rather than letting it just be this sterile moment of it's over now,
right? And Oliver too, and he was the only kid that was he had that awareness because we've been working,
because you've been practicing it,
right? To be able to, and not that the other kids didn't. I'm not saying that, but
they're just in a different space.
So it's just really neat. And I hope that's kind of my hope for kids and humanity, is just to spend more time honoring ourselves as sacred humans and people on this beautiful planet.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anneliese. Thank you so much for sharing more from your own practice of yoga and what you're teaching your students, whether they're adults or kids, and how that practice can help them in all these other transitions in their life. I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah. Thank you, Leann.
Thank you, audience, too, for listening with us again. I feel like I've been so fortunate and so lucky to have such wonderful guests on here to talk about their own transitions and how they navigate those. Please remember to download and like and subscribe and rate the podcast. I really appreciate all the support that we're getting. Please follow me on Instagram at Panther City Partners for more information about the podcast, but also about life's transitions. Remember, the only thing constant is change, but you don't have to go it alone. Thank you.